Hey, welcome to season 2, episode 6 of The Gray Zone. Let's fucking go. It's exciting. Today's episode is about commitment, and commitment, I don't know, it's pivotal. It's pivotal. It's pivotal to success. I think it's a requirement for it. And it's a lesson that I've learned over and over again in climbing, especially on a specific climb that I've been working and trying for 3 years now, where I know I'm fully capable of physically doing all of the movement, but it's the fear that's made it more difficult for me to commit to the learning of each move and then obviously doing the climb as a whole. It's a little bit higher, and so as I get higher up, I become more scared and it takes longer to learn each move, and so it's just been this long drawn out process that has slowed me down from doing the climb. At the same time, I don't actually there's no part of me that's frustrated about it. It's a beautiful climb. I love doing the movement, and it's clearly a lesson that I've needed to learn. Otherwise I would have done it by now. So that's the broad theme of the episode today, commitment. I've got 8 bullet points, 8 notes on commitment that I'll be sharing. And yeah, let's jump into it. So the first one, I already said it a little bit, but to expose yourself to the best possible outcome requires exposure to the worst possible outcome. So success requires exposure to failure. This is so obvious, especially in climbing, but it's relevant in business, and that doesn't mean that you can't minimize the risk of the worst possible outcome. And you can, for example, on a climb, for me to succeed and actually get to the top of this climb and get out over it requires me committing to a move where when I commit, it's almost like I'm giving up a certain degree of control. Because if I don't commit, if I hesitate, if I hold back, then I'm going to let go and take a controlled fall. Again, I'm letting go. Versus in full commitment, every single part of my mind and body is moving, committed towards that move that I'm doing. And if I make a mistake, now I'm no longer nearly as prepared for a fall because I'm not letting go. I've committed to the move. And inherent in that is an acceptance of the potential risk of falling in a more vulnerable way because it's a little bit more uncontrolled. Versus, again, that hesitation. And this is a huge challenge, a huge struggle to commit and accept the risk inherent with something. With starting a business, for example, if you're going to commit to starting a business, you need to be okay with the possibility of failing. I think it's also worth considering and asking yourself, what does failure actually mean? Because failure and growth kind of go hand in hand, really. If you're going to fail at something, that means what? Does it mean that you didn't succeed? But if you get up again and try again, did you really fail or did you learn? I don't know, something to keep in mind. The second thing, commitment is built in increments like mobility. So when you're stretching, when you're trying to become more flexible, more mobile, you go to the extent of what you're currently able to do. You stretch your legs. And then you play in that space. You move around a little bit in that space of uncomfort. You're not going all the way to a point where you're breaking yourself, but you go to the limit and then play a little bit and cross the line. And it's the same thing with rock climbing or with starting a business or with running a business or with anything. The commitment is built in increments. You build confidence. For example, on this climb that I've been trying, the first time I get to the next move that I haven't done before, I haven't tried before, and I'm a little bit higher than I'd like to be, I'm not committing fully because of the fear, but I'm perhaps just jumping up and touching the next hold and then taking an intentional fall. And the next time I jump up, touch it and grab it for a split second. Or I grab a ladder and I climb up and I just hold that position, and once the ladder's been moved away for me, so that I can just see, okay, if I do stick it, this is what it feels like, this is what it needs to be like. You build familiarity and comfort with that, and so you can actually make it easier and decrease the unknowns and the other variables around having to commit blindly the first time you're trying something. The third piece, we are often fully capable of committing and succeeding far earlier than our minds believe. This is where fear is just such a big factor, and you see this in sport climbing all the time. I already referred to it with myself on this climb. My fear held me back from committing, and so I had to spend more time in the place of building incremental commitment. But I've seen it all the time with myself, and I've seen it with other climbers, especially in climbs like sport climbing, where as a newer climber, fear is a bigger factor. So often people are so physically capable of doing a movement, so physically capable, it would be so easy for them to do something, but because of the fear, the body tightens and they don't believe that they can do something, and then of course they can't. And then it takes so long, they need to go through that incremental process of decreasing the fear, increasing the commitment by acting in slightly more bold ways until they believe and trust themselves enough to commit without being so scared of getting hurt. And it's crazy how much more we're capable of. It's just so obvious in rock climbing than we believe. Like, there's been so many times where I've fully thought I was coming off a route, and for some reason in that moment, I was able to commit through the fear, and the move sticks, and it works, and then you're able to keep going. And it's just such an insane experience to be so convinced that something is impossible, do it, and then see it become real right before your eyes. Like, super empowering. And I think it's a really interesting thing to keep in mind for running a business, or taking the risk of starting a business, or taking the risk of applying for a new job or leaving a job, or whatever the case might be. We are so capable of doing the actions required for success. Often the small actions that build up towards success, none of them are actually that difficult. They just require doing. And the less time we can spend worrying about it, the more time we can spend acting in that place, the quicker we grow. And the people I've seen become the best climbers the fastest are the ones who realize that commitment, and the ones who realize that if they commit quicker to a move, they're often able to do it way faster than if they spend a lot of time hesitating. Which leads us nicely into the fourth one. Commitment is killed by hesitation. Hesitation is fueled by a focus on fear of the outcome that we're trying to avoid. It feels somewhat self-explanatory. If you're in the middle of doing a move, if you're in the middle of about to take a risk and put yourself out there, and right in that moment, you're thinking about, I hope this doesn't go wrong. First of all, you're distracted. You're not thinking about what you're trying to do anymore. You're not in the moment, present, giving your full attention to something that is challenging and scary, increasing the likelihood of it going wrong in the first place. And you're thinking about the thing that you don't want to go happen. So far more likely to end up there. For example, if you're on a golf course and mid-swing, you're like, oh, I really don't want to hit this into the lake. You're probably hitting into the lake. And it's been interesting. There's a few times where, well, many times, projecting and climbing is when you try a route over and over and over again. You learn all the movements intentionally, like we talked about, like you're taking falls, you're taking rests on a climb until you know it, and then you start to red point it. And that means now I think I've done all the moves. I think I can do it in one go now. I'm at that point where I know it well enough. I know where to try hard. I know where to relax. So I'm going to try and send it in a single go, which is kind of like the goal. And there's times where I really enjoy, okay, what is the best mindset? What is the best mental space to be in before I get on this climb? And I'll kind of sit with that and be relaxed and be calm before getting on a climb. And it's fascinating because there's been times where in the middle of a red point burn where you've been trying a climb for days or months and you're on it, there's a moment where doubt creeps in the middle of a climb, or you don't do a move as well as you've done it every other time. And when I'm in a good state of mind, that just flows right through me. And the actions continue regardless of the emotions and of the doubt, and therefore they dissipate really quickly. Which is kind of like in some ways it reminds me of Stoicism, and it's just an interesting thing to keep in mind with hesitation. how you go into something and the energy that you carry of even just starting your day. Like, are you starting and are you stressed right away, or are you starting by giving yourself a little bit of time in the morning to just be and be relaxed, and then going into the day with that energy? I think it makes a huge difference. 5, commitment is an expression of trust in yourself, both trusting that you can succeed and trusting that if you fail, you can, will, and will be okay. I think this one's quite challenging. It's not easy to trust yourself, especially if you're doing something that you haven't done before, you're not even sure if it's possible. But that trust of, I will be okay if it's wrong, if it goes wrong, and I will be okay, and not even that I will be okay, but that I am also capable of succeeding. I think that opens up the freedom to really commit, because now the fear of things going wrong is lower. And again, this is where that incremental commitment can be super helpful. So for example, I know that a move is scary. I'm not going to do it without protection or safety of making sure that I've practiced the falls beforehand, or put pads in the right places because I know where I'm going to land, or have people spotting me, supporting me, so that if I fall, I don't bounce off the pads and hit my head on a rock. Trust, to build it, it comes from accumulated experience. So the faster that you can accumulate experience, the more trust and confidence you'll build in yourself, the easier it becomes to commit. And accumulated experience is simply action and reflection. Take action quickly, reflect on those actions, the factors that influence them and the consequences deeply, and then repeat. And I think this is super interesting because today it seems to me like we're overly indexed on action, and we're undervaluing reflection and being a little bit more slow. You wake up in the day, first thing you do is you check emails, you check LinkedIn, you check Slack, especially living out west where the day is a little bit further ahead and everybody's already going. And so there's this we're overvaluing taking action and moving really, really quickly all the time, which is still important and necessary. Like I said, action, the more you act, the quicker you learn and grow. But the learning and the growth part come from the reflection. And if something's undervalued in the stock market, what do? You invest in it if you know it's undervalued. And so I think that if you're able to be confident enough, trust yourself enough to slow down and take the time to reflect on the actions a little bit more often, you can actually accelerate your growth far more quickly. The last thing around commitment is coming from a book that I read recently called The Myth of Sisyphus by Albert Camus. And he's got a line in it that says to live without appeal, which to me means you need to make your own decisions. You can't look to others to help you make your decisions or to make your decisions for you. And this is especially true with commitment. Like, you need to decide for yourself, trust yourself, even though you don't know what the right action is. Okay, this is what feels right now. Because you can look at all of the variables, you can look at all of the analytics behind a decision, but at the end of the day, you still need to make that decision, and there's emotion that's going to drive that decision-making process. And so if you're able to say, okay, this is what feels 100%, this is what feels right to me, even though I don't know if this is the best thing to do or not, but I'm going to commit regardless, because if you can do that, and if you can commit to what feels right to you, there's way more ownership over that action. The learning and the growth will be way more intense, and you'll move forward way faster. So anyways, that's the episode on commitment. Hope